Well-being is so multifaceted. It could be your mental well-being, it could be your emotional well-being, your social well-being, your physical.
My generation really wants to put mental health and just our own well-being at the forefront. Like, we were the generation that was kind of raised on technology, and we will be the generation that sees the effect of it.
Growing up, Gen Z, like, we were always told, you can make change. Look around the world, see something you don't like, speak up about it. Do something about it. I want to talk to anybody who could help me just figure out what's my place in the world and how I could make that change.
We are going in this bright green RV, 3 weeks, a cross-country road trip.
We're going to be driving from Boston all the way to Atlanta.
Looking at mental health and well-being, interviewing leaders who are doing real work in their community.
I think this road trip will be a great opportunity to kind of shed light on unconventional wellness fields and professions.
There are people who have gone out, they've made their change, and now they're gonna be talking to us so that maybe we can make some impact ourselves.
That clip you just saw is from the latest Roadtrip Nation documentary called Where Wellbeing Grows. It came out just last month, and it follows the journey of 3 young adults who are exploring career paths in the well-being space. And that's what we're going to get into today. My name is Wazhma Wesa. I lead Global Social Impact Partnerships at Lululemon, and our work is all focused around advancing mental health and well-being through movement and mindfulness. Our global initiative is called Lululemon Gives. Through partnerships, grants, donations, volunteering, we support organizations that advance mental health, provide access to physical activity, and also address loneliness. And so in that work, we're so excited to be in partnership with organizations like Roadtrip Nation, and also part of initiatives like UNICEF's Global Coalition for Youth Mental Health. So today I'm joined by Dr. Zeinab Hijazi, who's the Global Mental Health Lead at UNICEF, Mike Marriner, who's the co-founder and president of Roadtrip Nation, and Anjali Verma, who is a youth mental health advocate. She's one of the Roadtrippers you just saw in the documentary, and she's also currently a public policy student at Stanford University. So thank you all so much for being here. And I want to give a special thanks to Anjali, who said yes to being here while she's still wrapping up final exams. So thank you, Anjali. Yes, that deserves an applause. I want to start off just by setting the context a bit for this conversation and understanding the current state of youth mental health and well-being. We know, we hear stats like globally 1 in 7 adolescents is living with a mental health condition. Typically, half of mental health conditions start at the age or by the age of 18. And so Zeinab, UNICEF does a lot of work around supporting the well-being of children and adolescents, has been doing so for almost 80 years. Could you share what some of the big challenges Gen Z is facing when it comes to mental health and well-being within a US context, but also thinking about it globally?
Yeah, thank you so much, Wazhma, and thank you everyone here for having us. So in a room that is filled with US-based leaders, I think it's really important to say that the pressures that I will mention are visible here in the US, from academic pressures to loneliness to uncertainty about the future, digital overload, stigma, and barriers to care. And of course, these are not unique to the US. At UNICEF, we are seeing these same challenges and barriers across countries, across contexts. And although they do show up quite differently, depending on context, depending on culture, depending on conflict and displacement and the different things that young people are facing globally and across different settings. And so when we talk about Gen Z, I think it's very important that we're not really kind of narrowing it down to a single experience. And I think it's also very important to remember that all of this doesn't begin in adolescence. Yes, a lot of the mental health conditions, they start in early adolescence, they start in early adulthood, but a lot of the things that we are facing, that young people are facing, are laid out much earlier. And it has to do with their experiences in early childhood, in middle childhood, in schools and communities and families. And so to ground us in statistics, you mentioned 1 in 7 young people experience a mental health condition. the leading cause of death in young people, in adolescents, is suicide. And 1 in 4 children is living with a caregiver with a mental health condition. And it brings us back to the aha moment that, yes, it's about young people's experiences in the world, it's also about their experiences in the home. You know, parents, caregivers, they're also struggling with unmet need, their own traumas, their own issues. And so it's really important as we think about, you know, young people to really think about that ecosystem of support that surrounds the child, and think about the challenges across those systems. One thing I think that many of us ask is, well, young people are talking so much about mental health these days. So what is the issue? Are we doing better in mental health? Yes, we are talking. We have the powerful voices of Anjali, and I think it's beautiful, and I think it's driving all of us into action. The problem is that stigma is still very much a real thing. It is experienced at an individual level, it is experienced within families, within communities, and even within the systems by the caregivers and providers that are themselves meant to provide that care. And this creates an issue of service gaps. So we're all trying to ensure that there are better services that meet the challenges that young people are facing that impact their mental health. Beautiful. These are things that we're actively trying to do here in the US and across different contexts, even in low and middle income countries and emergency contexts. The problem is, even when those services exist, it doesn't always equate better access to services, because services do not equal visibility, and access and existence of services does not equate accessibility. So these are really important things to mention. And the gap piece is important because young people, if they don't have access to safe, equitable, affordable, culturally relevant services, then they are going to seek those services elsewhere. When the human support isn't available, they're going to try to access other supports. And some of them are wonderful and protective, like in schools, like in peers, like through community organizations. Unfortunately, some young people are accessing services through modalities where I think the risks are we're still trying to figure out what those risks are, right? We're still figuring out the challenges. And this includes access through services, through digital spaces, through AI. And so it's important that we take into account where young people are in communities, whether online or offline, and ensure that we are the ones accountable to ensuring that they are accessing those services safely, and that we ensure that there is this ecosystem of services and supports that ensures that that service is available to them wherever they are. It's not on them to decide. It's not on them to establish safety. It's on us to create that environment for them, whether through legal reform or through psychoeducation and other things. And one last thing I will say, because we are talking to about Gen Z, Gen Alpha has entered the chat, and they are entering adolescence. And I think it's really important that we don't wait until the next crisis hits the next generation. Let's act now and think about early prevention and promotion in mental health.
Thank you so much, Zeinab, for laying that out so clearly. Mike, Roadtrip Nation is a nonprofit organization that supports students and young adults to find their meaningful career paths. Could you share a little bit more about that work that you're leading, and also how this Wellbeing road trip came about? Why now? Why that theme? Why that focus?
Yeah, I think what you said about amplifying Gen Z, Gen A youth voice, and what Coach O was saying about upstream impacts too. So that Roadtrip Nation, for 20 years, we've been putting students on road trips to help them find their career path and their road in life. So we have a fleet of huge 6 green motorhomes that every year go all across America, and students are in them to interview people in different career pathways and learn how they got to where they are today. And those road trips can either be focused on certain pathways or regions or themes like mental health, and we really believe in human-centered, asset-based storytelling that put youth at the center and give them a place at the table. And so the road trippers go across country and interview people from all these different paths and walks of life. And then we have a long-running series on PBS. This Anjali's road trip has been broadcast in 82 million households in the last 2.5 weeks. Wow. So that has been, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I think that's one of the things, and I think you see a big craving right now for asset-based, optimistic storytelling that show like youth out there, and not just the deficit-based stories we hear all the time. But then most importantly, in addition to the media footprint, we're also in half of all US public high schools. So we're the largest provider of career content to schools all across the country. So we have a database of 13,600 videos, because most kids and youth in America don't get the chance to live in a motorhome, go across America, but they need to see these stories of people and pathways that are navigating, and especially right now, there's so much change, so much in flux. How do you get upstream and help young people get access to these stories? So that's kind of, and so every year we choose certain themes. And actually it was at Social Innovation Summit 2 years ago where we were chatting with the Lulu team, and we're like, one of the themes we've been looking at lately is mental health and wellness, and if we could design a road trip around. So just, it shows the power of conferences like this to kind of like, be like, hey, we have a crazy idea. Oh, we have a focus on that. And here we are a couple years later. So pretty cool.
So great, so great. Anjali, you were one of the 3 young adults who participated in the experience. And I believe you were on the road trip after you graduated high school, before you started your studies. So what led to you becoming a youth mental health advocate, and why did you apply for the road trip?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, so I'm 19 years old, and mental health is something that's extremely close to my heart. In my high school, there was no student-led mental health organization or club on my campus. I'm from rural Pennsylvania, graduated from a Title I school, and I was like, we need to do something. So I talked to my 2 best friends, and I was like, what can we do? And we started this mental health chapter, actually starting with student-athlete mental health, because I was a swimmer and lacrosse goalie for 11 years each. And I saw some of the struggles that my teammates and my friends experienced, and we were like, we need to make change. And so my sophomore year of high school, I partnered with this incredible organization called Work to Be Well, and we started our school's first ever mental health and well-being club. And within 2 weeks, we gained 50 members, because that many students said, hey, this matters to me. I want to make sure my friends know that it's okay to not be okay, and that support and hope is available for them. And so it kind of exploded from there, and we were the 4th ever Work to Be Well club in my high school, but across the country. And now, as a college student, I get to mentor other clubs in other schools, in middle schools and high schools. And there's now 100 Work to Be Well clubs in over 30 states and 3 countries, which is so powerful because students care about this and they want to make change. If it's not going to come from the top, it's going to come from the bottom up. And so I was about to graduate high school, and one of my friends said, there's this thing called Roadtrip Nation. You could live in an RV, travel across the country for a month. Like, do you want to do that? And I was like, that sounds epic. Like, let me apply. And so I applied to this road trip, and I had no idea what to expect. And it was an absolutely life-changing experience for me, because I saw that the world is truly my oyster, and there's so many opportunities. Even if you don't work in a field that's directly mental health or wellness, mental health and wellness affects all of us, and that's what I really saw in the road trip. And so it was an incredible opportunity, and something that I will remember forever. Amazing.
Mike, can you share a bit about just this specific road trip, that experience? What did that look like? Where did the folks kind of stop, the types of leaders that were interviewed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you were saying about the stigma piece of it, and I think that's what we've seen first. The power of human-centered storytelling is like in our American Western culture, like everything's so perfect. Like we hear all the time when young people go to LinkedIn, they're kind of freaked out. It's like, oh my gosh, everyone has perfect career paths. Like there's no space for talking about when you delivered coffee, or when you paid off your student loans, or when you were first family to go to college, or whatever. And so I think that was what was really powerful about this, is that like people deal with mental health, and we all have issues in our lives, and there are people who are, but there's no safe space to talk about that. And so when you have a format where young people like can sit down, and we have this phrase called powerful vulnerability. So the road trippers, it's like physics, like equal and opposite reaction, and so they're not just sitting down and asking, so what's your day in life like? What you're getting coffee, whatever. They're really digging into it and sharing their own stories and their own experiences, and then that creates the equal and opposite kind of sharing, and it creates a real connection between the road trippers and the leaders, and then we're documenting that, and then we're tagging based on that in the archive. And so what the rich thing about this was that, you know, mental health and wellness is something that so many youth face, and these, you know, having the interviews on this trip in particular, like going deep into that, and I mean, whether it be like the mayor of Atlanta, we interviewed, who I know he's here later today, so they kind of like fun coincidence, but yeah, the Roadtrippers interviewed the mayor of Atlanta, and he talked about, what was that phrase he said?
Broadcast your dreams.
Broadcast your dreams. So when he was a kid growing up, he was like, someday I want to be the mayor of Atlanta, and he used to always say that, and then later in life, he kind of forgot that. He went into doing other stuff, but then he was like, wait a second, I used to always say when I was a kid, I want to be the mayor of Atlanta. And here he is today. And I don't know, what was some of your favorite moments in the trip? That was, sorry to me to go off script, but I mean, it was your trip, so you yeah.
I truly, so like I said, I had no idea what to expect. I was living in this RV with 5 other strangers, and our whole goal was to hear stories, and we wanted to reach the stories that often go untold. And that was a really beautiful thing for me to be a part of, and something that I'm so grateful to have the experience to have participated in, because there are so many stories. Each one of you in this room has a mental health, just like you all have a physical health. And your mental health and physical health are connected by one thing, and that's your neck. And so I think we always talk about, like, we kind of other mental health, and we're like, oh, like some people struggle. But truly, all of us are impacted by mental health. Just like if we're gonna go to the doctor because we have a sprained ankle, like we also should tell somebody when we're not feeling okay mentally or emotionally. And so that's what I really took away from the road trip, was that power of storytelling. But additionally, like the call to action is giving youth a seat at the table. Like when we're talking about mental health, we talk about youth mental health, and we talk about young people like me, like teenagers, like, oh, they're the future. But we're the future, but we're also the right now, and we're making changes in our schools and our communities. And what you all have to do as adults and leaders in your field is say, hey, we're gonna give young people the platform and voices to share their experiences, share their stories, and make sure that they can advocate for their friends and classmates and people that are struggling, because that's when change really starts. Because we all play for the same team. We all wanna see a brighter future where people feel okay and know where to get help when they need it. And so, especially thinking about things like suicide prevention, it is the most preventable cause of death. And we all play a role in making sure that people in our lives know that support is available to them. Awesome.
I just want to mention, in addition to the documentary, there is a wealth of resources that comes out of this process through a community hub that you all have created online, and so you see additional interviews and resources to really go deeper into all of that. And Zeinab was one of those leaders interviewed as well. Zeinab, I want to just quickly touch on your journey coming into the mental health space, but also kind of what's giving you hope and optimism in what you're seeing in your work.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, me too.
So spare you the full story, but Road Trip Nation did get the unfiltered version, if you're interested. I think at the heart of it, you know, I started in this field not as a professional, I started as a person. I, you know, came into this world of mental health through my own lived experience. You know, through my journey with depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation when I was younger, and also the experience of myself and my family of war and displacement. And so that is really at the heart of my journey. When I was in my very early 20s, 21 years old, I started volunteering with a nonprofit, and we were, you know, delivering services to children and families who were impacted by conflict. And for me, that was the start of something that I fell in love with. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. Mental health was a space that I wanted to engage in. And I remember in 2008, I was in Jordan in one of the refugee camps, and working with Iraqi families at the time. And I was sitting on the floor with this family. The father was a doctor back home in Iraq. The mom was a teacher. And then suddenly we were there. I was part of this mobile health team that was supposed to provide mental health services. And I sat there, and it wasn't about mental health. It was about dignity. It was about surviving. It was about food. It was about shelter. And in that moment, I was like, this is mental health. This is it. This is what we need to be talking about. We need to talk about the conditions for good mental health that need to be set up for families and for communities and for young people. And so for me, this is really what kind of shaped the trajectory of my career. And not to say that clinical care doesn't matter. Clinical care is critical, is important. That is why I myself became a clinician, because I felt the responsibility to have the credibility to work in this space. But coming into it as a clinician, as a technical person that understands that we need to advance policies that support child and youth mental health, that we need to expand services, and that we need to approach it through this socio-ecological model, I think this is hopefully what is reflected in the video. But I think also what gives me hope, I would say, yesterday at one of the breakout sessions, there was this wonderful question about, well, what does progress in mental health look like? Sadly, it's not the same as child nutrition. Child nutrition is so easy to measure and to see progress on. Mental health is much more nuanced. In fact, in some countries where we are making the most advancements, where we have primary healthcare providers and teachers and caregivers who are trained in mental health, where there's an ecosystem around the child, we actually see numbers go up. It's not because we're not doing a good job. It's because finally what was invisible is becoming visible. We're starting to identify things. So for me, success is not about lessening numbers of mental health conditions. We don't have enough data to actually look at that look at progress in that way. It is less shame. It is more access to services. It is about ensuring that services are available to young people where they need it, online and offline. So what gives me hope is that it is becoming a visible issue, and something that is visible becomes hard to ignore, and that gives me hope.
Amazing. I'm going to end off quickly, Mike. Where can folks see the documentary and yeah, any further resources and content from Roadtrip Nation?
It's broadcasting on PBS right now in stations all across the country. You can, on streaming, you can download the PBS app or on wherever your local PBS stations, or on roadtripnation.com. All the resources are there too. And come find us if you're interested in doing a local screening in your nonprofit, or your group, or whatever. We're sharing rights and IP to all the content. So if it's helpful at all in your work, please reach out to us and we can get you the assets you need. So.
I know we're out of time. I want to thank you all for being here. I urge you all to check out the documentary, pass it along through your networks, learn more about UNICEF's work and their Global Coalition for Youth Mental Health. And as a last piece, if you look under your seats, if anyone has, there are a few kind of prizes out there for you all, but if you have a love note taped to the bottom of your seat, please stop by the Lululemon booth during the break for a special gift. Oh, I see some winners. I see some winners. There we go.
All right.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.